A stray dog kept following a car when they stopped. He did this. They first noticed him in the hazy glow of the headlights, a flash of matted fur scampering off to one side on a lonely rural road. It was 2:17 a.m. The sky was an inky swath of darkness, lit only by the moon's pallid glow, making the world seem eerily still. At that hour, no one should have been on that road. Everything felt surreal, like driving through a forgotten dream. Yet there they were, Adam, his wife Lena, and their nearly silent creeping along the quiet asphalt, the engine's soft hum and their own unsteady breathing the only hints of life in an otherwise slumbering county. It happened so fast. One moment, Adam was fiddling with the radio, trying to find anything other than static, and the next, the dog darted into the glow of the headlights, its body stiff, eyes wide with what might have been desperation. Adam slammed on the brakes, heart pounding as he gripped the steering wheel, Lena lurching forward against with a sharp gasp. The car screeched to a halt, the headlights illuminating a swirl of dust and grit. For one excruciating second, they both thought they'd hit the poor creature. But then the dust cleared, and Adam spotted it. A scruffy, bone-thin stray dog, trembling about 6 feet in front of the bumper, staring straight at them. Lena pressed a hand to her chest. "Oh God, are we sure we didn't?" She barely finished her question before the dog bolted away into the shadows, too fast and agile for Adam to see clearly. He leaned back against the seat, breath still ragged. It felt like a near-death experience on both sides. But what stuck with Adam wasn't just relief that they hadn't run the dog over. It was the way the stray had paused, just for a moment, eyes reflecting the harsh electric glow of the headlights as though silently begging them to stop. Adam and Lena exchanged glances. They both wanted to check on the animal to ensure it wasn't hurt, but the dog was gone, at least for the moment. The countryside was thick with the hush of the night, and they could practically feel the staccato of their hearts echoing around the small interior of the car. They might have just started driving again if it wasn't for the echo of that look in the dog's eyes, but something propelled them forward, a quiet insistence that they do more. Adam gently nudged the car onward, scanning the road's shoulders. For the next 2 miles they saw no sign of him. Eventually, the tension began to thaw. Adam exhaled and slumped in his seat. Lena brushed hair from her face, allowing a quiet wave of exhaustion to settle back in. The near accident had ended as abruptly as it began, with the dog disappearing into the night. But not long after, Adam's eyes flicked to the mirror. Movement. There was a shape behind them, loping quickly, determined. At first, it was too far back to be certain, but with each passing second it closed the gap, until the taillights cast an unmistakable silhouette. The stray dog was following them. Adam almost didn't believe it. He tried speeding up slightly, hoping the dog would be discouraged. But no, the animal somehow mustered the energy to keep pace. It looked half-starved, maybe injured, definitely exhausted, yet it refused to give up. Its rapid breathing was visible even from a distance, sides heaving. The dog kept running, ears flat, and in the side mirror, Adam could make out the creature's eyes, wide and unwavering. The determination there unsettled him as much as it moved him. "Is he chasing us?" Lena asked, voice soft as though she didn't quite trust the stillness of the night not to shatter. "I think he is," Adam said, glancing over again. The dog was clearly struggling to maintain speed, stumbling every few strides but continuing nonetheless. Lena chewed her lip. "Pull over." Adam swallowed. "Are you sure it's safe?" She paused, looking out at the deserted farmland. A mist curled lazily around fence posts and the edges of a wheat field. Beyond that, only emptiness. "We can't just leave him out here," she said. "He might be hurt. He looks desperate." Adam considered this. They'd driven past strays before in the city. Sometimes they'd called animal control, but never had they felt compelled to stop. Tonight, though, something felt different, urgent, almost faded. A chill along Adam's spine. He couldn't explain it, but it was as if the dog was trying to tell them something, to deliver some silent message in the middle of the night. "Okay," he said, and gently pulled the car to the side of the road. Gravel crunched under the tires, the headlights capturing floating specks of dust in the air. They came to a standstill, hearts pounding. The dog approached, panting heavily, its tongue lolling. Adam reached for the door handle and Lena placed a hand on his arm. "Be careful," she whispered. He nodded. Slowly he pushed the door open, stepping out into the chilly darkness. The high beams made everything in front of the car too bright, causing the dog to appear as a trembling silhouette. Adam squinted and raised a hand to his brow, trying to see the dog better. A few uncertain steps, and he was close enough to hear the raggedness of the dog's breath. It had collapsed onto its haunches, still panting, eyes locked on Adam with an intensity that bordered on otherworldly. Its coat was a patchwork of mud and matted fur, the ribs visible beneath the skin. "It's okay, buddy," Adam said quietly. He wasn't even sure why he was speaking in such soothing tones, maybe because the dog's trembling was so pronounced. "We're not going to hurt you, it's okay." The dog's panting slowed. There was no growl, no baring of teeth, just that unblinking gaze. Slowly, Adam extended a hand. The dog sniffed the air, nostrils flaring, and inched forward. Adam's palm hovered in front of it, open and vulnerable. Lena, from the passenger seat, leaned over to watch, every muscle tensed. She was torn between fear and compassion. She whispered a silent prayer for Adam's safety, though she wasn't sure to whom she was praying. She just wanted things to be all right. At last, the dog inched close enough to let its nose brush against Adam's outstretched fingers. Adam held his breath. The dog closed its eyes for a fleeting moment, as though this touch were an unimaginable relief. Then, with no warning, it turned and began walking away, pausing a few feet ahead to look back over its shoulder. Adam blinked, confused. "Are you leading me somewhere?" The dog waited, ears perked slightly, gaze urging him to follow. It was as if the dog's entire soul was in its eyes, beseeching him not to give up. Adam's heart twisted. He glanced at Lena, who mouthed, "Be careful." He nodded, swallowing hard, and moved after the stray. The dog led him off the shoulder, into the tall grass. The night air smelled faintly of dew and distant manure from nearby farmland. A few restless crickets chirped. With each step, Adam felt the dryness in his throat. Something about the dog's behavior was both eerie and magical, like stepping into an old about animals guiding humans to hidden wonders or dire warnings. They walked some 50 yards, with Lena growing more anxious by the second as she watched from the passenger seat, the door still ajar. She couldn't let Adam venture too far alone in the dark, so she took a shaky breath and decided to follow. Leaving the car's hazard lights blinking in the gloom, she hurried after them. Adam spotted a small ditch or gully. The dog paced its rim, nose pointing downward, whimpering softly. Something glimmered faintly down in the darkness. Adam flicked on the flashlight app on his phone and aimed the narrow beam of light toward the ditch. What he saw made his stomach turn. There, at the bottom, was a rusted metal cage. Inside it, collapsed on a pile of soiled rags, was another dog, a smaller one, possibly a puppy, unmoving. Its flank rose and fell ever so slightly, indicating it was still alive, but just barely. Lena arrived at Adam's side, breath hitching when she saw the scene. A wave of anger and heartbreak flooded through her. "Who would do this?" she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. The puppy's fur was patchy, and it looked painfully thin, with fresh lacerations across its muzzle and forelegs. The cage was half submerged in water that stank of rot. The stray standing next to them whined louder now. Adam had no idea if the puppy was the dog's offspring or companion, but it was clear from the stray's frantic panting that they were connected by something deeper than chance. Adam carefully made his way down the slippery bank, the mud threatening to steal his footing. "Adam, be careful," Lena called, voice trembling. He nodded without looking back, focused entirely on reaching the battered cage. Each step sank into the murky water. The stench made him gag, but he pushed on until he was close enough to crouch beside the cage. The puppy let out a feeble whimper. "It's okay," Adam murmured, voice tight with emotion. His hands fumbled with the latch on the cage. It was rusted shut. He braced himself, grabbed the cage door, and yanked. The metal groaned in protest but finally yielded. With trembling arms, he lifted the limp puppy out of the filthy water. Up above, the older stray let out a low, mournful howl that reverberated across the field. Carrying the puppy was like holding a feather. It weighed so little. Its body was all bones and wet fur. Adam's heart pounded, tears threatening as he scrambled up the ditch. Lena reached out, taking the puppy from him. Gently, she pressed a palm against its small chest. The heartbeat was fluttery, weak. The older stray approached, sniffing the puppy all over and licking its ears, whimpering as if urging it to wake up. Then the stray raised its head and let out another guttural sound of grief. Adam took off his jacket and wrapped the puppy, trying to keep it warm. For a moment, the three of them just stood there. Adam, Lena, and the stray dog, united by this single act of compassion in a world that had, until that night, felt so indifferent. The question was, what next? They couldn't leave the puppy out here, nor could they just assume the stray would vanish if they tried to bring the puppy to a vet. Finally, Adam looked at the older stray and said, "We'll take care of him, I promise." The dog's ears twitched, eyes luminous with a strange mixture of hope and fear. Lena nodded decisively. "We have to find an emergency vet." It was an hour's drive to the nearest town that might possibly have a late-night veterinary clinic. Without hesitation, they walked back to the car. The stray followed, tail low, expression guarded yet pleading. Adam carefully laid the puppy in the back seat on a towel, rummaging for anything to help, some leftover water in a plastic bottle, a small medical kit. He flicked through his phone, searching for an emergency animal hospital. Lena stared at the older dog standing just beyond the open rear passenger door, uncertain whether it should jump in or remain outside. She patted the seat gently. "Come on," she coaxed. The stray paused, trembling. Then, perhaps sensing their intentions, it hopped onto the seat beside the puppy, curling its body protectively around the small, motionless form. Adam shut the door gently and slid into the driver's seat, hands shaking as he started the engine. "There's a 24-hour clinic a town over," he said, his voice thick. 45 minutes if I drive fast." Lena's voice wavered with emotion. Just be careful on the road." He nodded. The night pressed in on them from all sides as Adam floored the gas, the headlights slicing through the darkness. The surreal hush that had enveloped them earlier was replaced by a tense urgency. It felt as though they were racing against time, the dog in the back seat lying so still that Lena had to keep glancing over her shoulder to ensure the puppy was still breathing. Yet as they sped through the deserted roads, a quiet bond formed within the car. The older stray kept its muzzle on the puppy's neck, an unspoken vow of guardianship. Occasionally, the dog lifted its gaze toward the front seat, as if to say, "Do whatever it takes. Don't let this puppy die." They arrived at the clinic at 3:10 a.m. The building was a small, squat structure with a flickering fluorescent sign that buzzed in the night's stillness. Adam pulled into the empty parking lot, heart thunderous. The moment he opened the back door, the older stray hopped out, tail tucked. Adam scooped the weak puppy into his arms, and together they hurried inside. The receptionist on duty, a tired-eyed woman in scrubs, blinked in surprise as they rushed in. "We found him abandoned," Lena blurted, words tumbling over each other. "He's in really bad shape. Please, can you help?" The woman sprang into action, calling down the hall. A veterinarian appeared, stethoscope around her neck, leading them to an exam room lit with glaring fluorescent lights. A bitter smell of disinfectant clung to the air. The older stray tried to follow but let out a startled yelp at the threshold, perhaps afraid of the sterile environment or the sudden flurry of activity. He paced outside the exam room door, whining. Lena knelt to stroke his head. Adam placed the puppy on the metal exam table. The vet checked for injuries, infection, dehydration, her face drawn. "He's very weak," she said softly. "We'll do what we can, but he's severely malnourished." Do you know how long he was out there? Adam shook his head near tears. No idea. He was locked in a cage left in a ditch. This stray dog led us there. The veterinarian's expression darkened with anger at such cruelty, but she quickly masked it with professionalism. She administered fluids, checked vital signs, and gave the puppy an injection to help stabilize him. Lena stood beside the older stray, who now rested his chin on her knee as if finding solace in her presence. The faint beep of machines and the low murmur of the vet's instructions to the assistant filled the stark silence. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Adam paced. Lena gently stroked the older dog's ears, feeling the tension coiled in its body. The stray seemed poised to spring forward at any moment, yet it also radiated a quiet trust in what the humans were doing. Finally, the vet turned around, fatigue etched into every line of her face. "He's still very fragile," she said, "but we've got him on IV fluids and medication. We'll keep him overnight, monitor him closely. I can't make any promises, but we're giving him a fighting chance." Adam closed his eyes in relief, tears escaping. Lena buried her face in Adam's shoulder, biting back a sob. The older stray let out a low whine as though asking, "Is the puppy going to live?" The vet glanced down, empathy filling her gaze. "We'll do everything we can, old boy." Outside in the waiting area, the overhead lights flickered. The air conditioner hummed softly. Adam and Lena sank into plastic chairs, both physically and emotionally spent. The stray dog sat at their feet, casting glances toward the exam room door. Occasionally, he'd sniff the air, as if he could glean the puppy's condition from the scents wafting out. The night stretched on. "Do you think," Lena began, then stopped, unsure of how to put her swirling thoughts into words. "Do you think the puppy is his? Or maybe it was from the same place, some backyard breeder or dog fighting ring?" Adam shook his head, face grim. "I don't know, but clearly he cares. He followed our car for miles. He brought us to that ditch. He knew. Adam paused, swallowing thickly. "He saved that puppy's life. If he hadn't shown us, the puppy would died alone in that cage." They let that sink in, the weight of the stray's actions reaffirming the depth of canine loyalty, even toward a dog that might not have been his own kin. The notion was both heartbreaking and awe-inspiring. Time became a haze. Dawn tinted the sky with soft lavender. Occasionally, one of the clinic's staff members would shuffle by, offering them water or quiet reassurance. The older stray never moved from their feet, only changing position to slump onto its side when exhaustion overcame it. At around 6:45 a.m., the veterinarian re-emerged. Her faint smile caused an almost electric jolt of hope in Lena's chest. "He's stable for now," she said, voice cautious. "He's got a feeding tube, and he's responding to fluids better than we expected. He's going to need significant care, though. He can't just go back out onto the streets." Adam and Lena exchanged glances. Their lives were not particularly structured to adopt another pet. Adam worked long hours in construction, and Lena was an elementary school teacher who already spent her days exhausted from dealing with her boisterous class. Yet how could they walk away from this? "We'll cover the cost of his treatment," Adam said, surprising even himself with the conviction in his voice. "And, well, we can't separate him from his friend." He nodded at the older stray, whose ears perked up at the mention of friend. The veterinarian gave a soft chuckle, relief mingling with exhaustion. "I was hoping you'd say that. He'll need a stable environment, at least while he recovers. If you can manage it, we'll discharge him in a couple of days, assuming he continues to improve." Lena gave Adam a watery smile. "Thank you," she whispered. "We'll do it." Adam placed a hand on Lena's, and though they both felt the daunting reality of the decision, it also felt right. Like some cosmic plan had led them down that empty road in the middle of the night, guided by a dog's unwavering loyalty. A few hours later, they finally left the clinic, leaving the puppy in the staff's capable hands. Exhaustion washed over them like a tide. They stopped by a local motel for a few hours' rest, the older stray curling up on the floor at the foot of their bed. Sleep did not come easily, haunted as they were by the memory of that rusted cage, the frantic chase in the night, and the uncertain future of the fragile puppy. When the haze of partial slumber finally lifted, it was nearing noon. Lena sat up, brushing the hair from her eyes, and found the stray dog staring at her intently from the motel floor, tail thumping softly when she met his gaze. "Hey, sweet boy," she murmured, sliding off the bed to rub behind his ears. He licked her hand, then looked at the door. Adam yawned and checked his phone. A missed call from the clinic. Heart pounding, he dialed back, gripping the phone so tight his knuckles whitened. Lena watched as Adam's expression morphed from anxiety to cautious optimism. He hung up and exhaled. "They say the puppy's stable," he reported, voice trembling with relief. "He's responding better than they expected, but he's not out of danger yet." Lena hugged him, a surge of gratitude flooding her chest. Then the older stray nuzzled between them, as if he, too, needed reassurance. Adam placed a hand on the dog's head, meeting its gaze. "He's going to be okay," Adam said, though his voice carried the unspoken caveat. "We hope." They spent the day gathering supplies for the puppy's eventual discharge: soft blankets, puppy formula, a small crate for recovery, to ensure he wouldn't wander off or injure himself further, and various medical necessities recommended by the vet. Each purchase deepened their sense of commitment. Both felt the weight of responsibility pressing on them. Not only were they forging a bond with these dogs, but also stepping into a role they had never before considered: rescuers. By late afternoon, they decided to visit the clinic again. The older stray seemed eager, trotting by their sides with more energy than he'd shown earlier. At the reception, the same tired-eyed woman smiled. She led them to the back, where the puppy lay in a small enclosure under gentle heat, an IV attached to his front paw. Lena's eyes filled with tears at the sight of him. He appeared so fragile, bandaged in places, but there was a subtle spark of life in his eyes now that hadn't been there before. The older stray whined softly, pressing his nose against the cage's wire door. The puppy lifted its head a fraction, and though he didn't make a sound, his eyes seemed to register the presence of his protector. Adam felt something shift inside him, a gentle warmth that chased away the cynicism he'd accumulated over his years. There was something pure and unbreakable about the connection between these two dogs, as if it transcended words, relying instead on shared trust and unwavering loyalty. The vet checked the puppy's vital signs again and addressed Adam and Lena. "You're welcome to visit as much as you like, but I recommend giving him time to rest. The fluids and the medication are working, but it's a delicate balance. We'll try introducing some light food tomorrow and see how he responds." "Thank you," Lena murmured, voice thick. She reached through the cage to gently stroke the puppy's head, her heart swelling when she felt a tiny nuzzle back. That night, they returned to the motel, unsure what else to do. Exhaustion from lack of sleep gnawed at them, but a fragile sense of hope buoyed their spirits. The older stray curled up again on the floor near the bed, though this time, Adam and Lena had set down a makeshift bed from towels they'd brought. The dog eyed them uncertainly, but eventually settled onto the towels, letting out a low groan of relief. In the dim glow of the bedside lamp, Lena whispered, "What do we do after this? Take them home? Try to find them a permanent place with someone else?" Adam sighed, threading his fingers through hers. "I'm not sure. We live in that little apartment downtown. Our lease doesn't even allow dogs." He paused, thinking of the landlord's stern face. "But maybe we can figure something out or move somewhere else. I can talk to my buddy who fosters dogs. Maybe he has room." Lena pressed her lips together, then slid closer to Adam. "I know we didn't plan for any of this, but I feel like it happened for a reason. That dog could have followed any car or no car at all, but it followed ours. Sometimes things happen that we don't understand, but they shape us into who we're meant to be." Adam nodded, staring at the flickering shadows on the ceiling. "Yeah, it feels like destiny in a weird way." They drifted to sleep, lulled by the steady presence of the stray dog's breathing. The next few days were a whirlwind of visits to the clinic, phone calls to see if any fosters were available, and silent prayers that the little puppy would keep improving. The older stray had become a constant companion, riding in the back seat or napping at the motel whenever Adam and Lena went out. The dog's behavior suggested he'd never truly lived in a home. He flinched at sudden movements, cowered at loud noises, and had scars hidden under his matted fur. It was impossible not to wonder about the cruelty he must have endured. Each evening, they returned to the motel, a place that felt more and more like a refuge from the world's harshness. Sometimes the older stray would greet them at the door, tail wagging slowly, as if to ask, "Any news about the puppy?" They were becoming a little makeshift family, bound by shared worry and blossoming hope. On the fourth day, the veterinarian called. "He's good to go home," she said, voice warm with cautious optimism. "He's not fully recovered yet, but I think he'll do better with consistent care from someone who can give him plenty of love and attention." Adam and Lena exchanged looks across the motel room, excitement and anxiety intertwining in their chests. They loaded up the car with the supplies they'd gathered and drove to the clinic. When they saw the puppy, their hearts swelled. He still looked fragile, bandages on one hind leg and around his middle, a patch shaved off his fur where the IV needle had been. But his eyes were brighter. There was a hint of a tail wag as they approached, which seemed to astonish even the vet. The older stray let out a low bark, then sniffed the puppy all over, as if double-checking that everything was in order. The staff helped them fill out paperwork and gave them post-care instructions, antibiotics, special food, gentle handling, and a plan for follow-up visits. As they drove away, the puppy nestled in Lena's lap, resting his head against her forearm. The older stray sat beside them, occasionally pressing his nose to the puppy's face in a tender, reassuring gesture. It was, to Adam, a poignant moment. A battered older dog and a rescued puppy, both forging a new path together in the back seat of a sedan that had once felt so empty. Their next challenge was what to do about living arrangements. Adam and Lena's apartment lease explicitly prohibited pets. Lena suggested they speak to the landlord, perhaps plead their case, but Adam worried the landlord might not budge. In the meantime, his friend, an experienced dog foster, was out of state for a few weeks. Reluctantly, they decided to remain in the motel a little longer. It wasn't ideal, but at least it provided a temporary safe haven. The days that followed were filled with round-the-clock care for the puppy, who they called Lucky, because, in more ways than one, that's exactly what he was. The older stray they began calling Guardian, a nod to the unwavering vigilance he displayed. It seemed to fit, a dignified name for a dog who had risked everything to save another life. Guardian was surprisingly gentle with Lucky, grooming him and lying beside him for warmth. Lucky would snuggle into Guardian's side, drifting to sleep with a tiny sigh that melted Lena's heart every time. The first night Lucky tried to walk on his injured leg, he whimpered and nearly collapsed. Guardian rushed to his side, muzzle nudging him gently to encourage him to try again. There was something heartbreakingly tender in the way the older dog guided the puppy, as if teaching him that the world, though cruel, could also hold pockets of safety. One morning, Adam woke to find Guardian sitting by the motel door, head tilted, as if listening to something beyond its cheap wooden frame. The dog's posture radiated tension. Adam rubbed his eyes and got up. "What is it?" he asked quietly. Guardian turned to look at him, then back at the door, letting out a low rumble from deep in his throat. It wasn't quite a growl, more like an alert. Adam's heart panged with alarm. They were in a quiet area, but maybe someone was out there. Carefully, Adam moved to the peephole. The parking lot was mostly empty except for a battered pickup truck parked near the entrance. Then he spotted a figure loitering around the edges of the motel, smoking a cigarette, glancing over at their door. Adam tensed. He wasn't sure if he was being paranoid, but something about the man's furtive behavior set his nerves on edge. Guardian paced back and forth, a silent sentinel. Lucky, still half asleep, yawned and curled up near Lena's feet, oblivious to the tension. "Maybe it's nothing," Adam told Guardian, though his own voice didn't carry much conviction. The dog continued to stare at the door with unwavering focus. To ease his mind, Adam stepped outside and closed the door behind him, leaving Guardian, Lena, and Lucky inside. The early morning sun cast a hazy light on the cracked pavement. The man with the cigarette noticed Adam and gave a slight nod, then wandered off toward the far side of the parking lot. Adam noticed he was wearing dirty jeans, a hooded jacket pulled tight around him even though it was relatively warm out. Adam tried to shake off the unease as he returned inside, but Guardian's demeanor made it clear the dog remained on alert. Lena stirred awake, noticing the tension in the air. "Everything okay?" she asked. "I'm not sure," Adam replied. "There's a guy loitering out there. Probably nothing to worry about, but Guardian seems spooked." Lena frowned. Could it be someone connected to how Lucky was left in that ditch? Maybe we're just on edge, but still, this is all so strange. They carried that worry for the rest of the day. They made sure not to leave Lucky and Guardian alone for too long, and Adam approached the front desk to ask if the motel had security cameras. The clerk gave him a bored shrug, revealing that their only camera was out of commission and had been for months. Later that evening, Adam took Guardian for a short walk around the motel while Lena fed Lucky inside. The parking lot, illuminated by harsh yellow lights, felt vulnerable, as though the shadows were filled with unseen eyes. Guardian stuck close to Adam's side. Just as they turned a corner, Adam spotted a figure duck behind a trash bin. His pulse spiked. Guardian froze, hackles bristling. "Hello," Adam called, heart hammering, no response. Carefully, he edged closer to the bin. The stench of rotting garbage seared his nose. He peeked around, only to find a crumpled blanket and some discarded food containers. The figure was gone, if there'd even been one. He couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. The worry gnawed at him through the rest of the walk, his mind conjuring dreadful scenarios. The dog fighting ring's owner coming to reclaim Guardian, or some unscrupulous person suspecting they had two valuable dogs. Perhaps it was just the adrenaline from recent events, but it felt all too real. Guardian, for his part, remained alert, occasionally stopping to sniff the air and let out a low, uneasy whine. When they finally returned to the motel room, Lena was sitting on the bed with Lucky. "He ate his food," she said, trying to sound cheerful, but Adam could see the tension behind her smile. They were both exhausted. The motel's dingy walls and stale carpet only amplified their sense of vulnerability. That night, Guardian refused to settle down. He paced the room, sniffed at the door, and whimpered softly, like he expected a threat at any moment. Adam tried to calm him, but nothing seemed to soothe the dog's restlessness. Then, at around 2 a.m., it happened, a loud thud against the door. Guardian let out a furious bark, startling Lucky awake. Lena jolted upright in bed, heart pounding. Adam sprang out of bed, adrenaline surging, fear twisting his stomach. Through the thin walls, they could hear muffled voices, 2, maybe 3 people just outside. "Open the door, or we're coming in anyway," someone hissed. Lena clutched Lucky to her chest. The puppy let out a frightened squeak. Guardian growled deep in his throat, pressing his body against the door as if daring whoever was out there to break it down. Adam, hands shaking, fumbled for his phone to call the police. Before he could dial, the lock rattled. Adam realized with growing horror that the door's chain might not hold if they forced it. He grabbed a lamp from the nightstand, the only makeshift weapon in reach. "Who are you?" Adam shouted through the door, voice cracking slightly. No answer, just more shuffling and a heavy shoulder banging into the door. The chain strained with a metallic creak. Guardian snarled, posture rigid, eyes fierce. He looked ready to tear through the wood to defend them all. Everything happened in a disorienting rush. The door gave way a few inches, but Guardian lunged at the gap, snapping at the intruder's hand. A cry of pain came from outside. "Damn dog bit me," one voice yelled. Adam took advantage of the momentary distraction to yank the door fully shut, sliding the deadbolt in place. The chain was bent, barely functional, but at least the bolt might hold. Lena was on the phone, voice trembling, telling the operator they were under attack. Suddenly, the sounds outside retreated. Tires squealed in the parking lot. Adam dared to look out the window in time to see a beat-up truck peeling out into the night, its headlights off. For a moment the quiet roared in his ears. Guardian stood at the door, still growling, chest heaving. Lucky let out a tiny whimper from Lena's arms. "It's okay," Lena whispered, though she didn't believe it herself. "The police are coming." The rest of that night was a blur of flashing lights, uniformed officers taking statements, and the motel manager apologizing profusely. None of them knew who the men were or why they targeted Adam and Lena's room specifically. One of the officers pointed out that Adam's car had out-of-state plates, and criminals sometimes assumed travelers might have valuables. The puzzle remained. How did they know about the dogs? In the aftermath, the police offered no concrete assurances. They took a report, promised extra patrols, and left. The motel manager tried to fix the door chain, but the bent metal barely sufficed. Adam and Lena sat on the edge of the bed, numb with fear and exhaustion, while Guardian remained near the door, watchful. Lucky, feeling the tension, nuzzled closer to Lena and let out a soft whine. By morning, they decided they couldn't stay in the motel any longer. It was too dangerous, especially if those intruders came back. With no fosters available and no dog-friendly apartments easy to find on short notice, they called Adam's uncle, who owned a small house in a neighboring county, empty since he moved to a retirement community. Adam explained the situation, and his uncle, outraged by the cruelty inflicted on the dogs and by the break-in, readily agreed to let them stay there temporarily. The following day, they loaded the car with everything they had: clothes, supplies for Lucky, a makeshift bed for Guardian. The journey to Adam's uncle's house took nearly 3 hours, weaving through quiet back roads and farmland that felt suspended in time. With each mile, the tension in their chests eased a fraction, as if they were traveling not just toward a safer location, but toward a new life. The house was modest, a single-story ranch tucked amid tall grasses, with a creaky front porch and paint that peeled in places. But it was theirs for the moment, a sanctuary. The air smelled of wildflowers and fresh-cut hay. Lena inhaled it all, letting her shoulders drop from around her ears. Guardian hopped out of the car, tail swishing cautiously. Lucky remained in Lena's arms, peering at the unfamiliar surroundings with wide eyes. Inside, the air was stale, having been unoccupied for months. They opened windows, letting a gentle breeze in. Dust motes floated in sunbeams. The living room was sparse: an old couch, a coffee table with chipped edges, and a narrow hallway leading to 2 bedrooms and a small kitchen. It felt lonely but safe. Guardian immediately began exploring, sniffing every corner, tail relaxed as he familiarized himself with this new domain. Lucky, still wobbly, toddled around carefully on his injured leg, curious. They found an old rug in one of the closets, rolled it out in the living room to give Lucky traction. As soon as the puppy took a few steps on the rug, Guardian trotted over, bumping his nose against Lucky in a gesture of encouragement. Lena could have sworn she saw a spark of joy in Guardian's dark eyes. That night, they all slept in the living room. Adam and Lena set up blankets on the couch, Lucky curled up on a pillow near them, and Guardian sprawled out on the rug, always keeping a protective eye on the puppy. The windows were cracked open, allowing the gentle chorus of crickets to lull them to sleep. No sirens, no flickering neon motel lights, no sense of immediate danger. Just the hush of the countryside, an embrace of quiet that felt almost unreal after the chaos of the past week. In the days that followed, a rhythm emerged. Adam and Lena took turns driving into town for groceries and to pick up more of Lucky's medication. They arranged follow-up vet visits at a local clinic, which turned out to be staffed by a kindly older couple who marveled at Lucky's progress. The scars on his body were healing, and although his leg was still bandaged, he was beginning to walk with more confidence. His appetite improved, and he responded with bright-eyed curiosity to every new experience. The crunch of fallen leaves underfoot, the rustling grass in the yard, the gentle warmth of the sun on his fur. Guardian seemed to thrive too, though it was evident from his mannerisms that he'd been through trauma. Certain sudden noises sent him cowering, and he never strayed too far from Lucky's side. Over time, though, Guardian started to wag his tail more often. Once, Lena caught him rolling on his back in the yard, paws flailing in the air as Lucky bounded around him. She laughed until tears streamed down her face. It was as if the weight of old horrors was slowly dissolving, replaced by moments of pure, simple joy. Adam worked remotely when he could, calling in to coordinate with his construction team and letting them know he'd be out of the city for a while. Lena had taken a leave of absence from her teaching job. It was summer break, anyway, and she'd told her principal she needed a few extra weeks to sort out personal matters. Although their finances grew by the day, they both agreed they couldn't abandon Guardian and Lucky now. One afternoon, as the sun hung low in the sky, painting the fields in a wash of gold, Lena sat outside on the porch, sipping iced tea. Guardian lay at her feet, head resting on his paws, eyes half closed. Lucky was inside, napping on a pile of blankets. Adam came out of the house, plopping into the rocking chair next to Lena. "You know," he said, his voice thoughtful, "I keep thinking about that moment we first saw Guardian on the road. The way he looked at us. I've never seen such desperation in an animal's eyes." Lena nodded, a pang tugging at her chest. "Me neither. It was like he was ready to risk everything just for a chance to save Lucky." "Yeah," Adam said, shaking his head in quiet wonder. "And look at him now, he's calmer, happier. But I still see that watchfulness, like he's waiting for something bad to happen." Lena gently stroked Guardian's ears, feeling him lean into her touch. "We might never know everything he went through," she murmured. "All we can do is keep showing him he's safe now." Adam gazed out at the swaying grasses, the horizon tinged with the pink hues of an impending sunset. "Sometimes I wonder if he had a family once. Maybe he was loved and something terrible happened. Maybe they lost him, or he ran away from abuse, or he trailed off. We'll never know," Lena said softly, "but he found us when he needed to. Or maybe he found us when we needed him." They let the silence envelop them, the soft chirping of birds in the distance weaving a melody of peace. Guardian lifted his head, ears pricking up at the rustle of wind. Lena felt an overwhelming surge of gratitude to share this moment with such a brave, loyal creature. Then, on the evening of the 10th day, something unexpected happened. Lena was in the kitchen preparing a light dinner, canned soup and sandwiches, when Guardian suddenly bolted upright from his spot in the living room and trotted to the front door. He let out a short, sharp bark, startling Lucky, who was chewing on a small bone. Adam, glancing up from the pile of paperwork he'd spread across the coffee table, said, "Guardian, what is it, boy?" The dog barked again, paws scratching at the door, tail rigid. Lena wiped her hands and hurried to see what was causing Guardian's alarm. She peered out the window. There, in the distance, headlights glimmered on the dirt road leading to the house. The car was still too far away to identify, but Guardian sensed something. Lena's heart beat faster. Who would be driving out here at dusk? Adam joined her at the window. Could it be the mail carrier, or the neighbors? But we haven't exactly met any neighbors. They watched as the car, a dark SUV, slowed, turned onto the gravel driveway and approached the house. Guardian pressed his nose to the crack at the bottom of the door, letting out a low growl. Lucky, still inside, cocked his head, uncertain. When the SUV came to a stop, the door opened and a man stepped out. He wore a clean button-down shirt and jeans. He was tall, with broad shoulders and carefully groomed hair. Cautiously, Adam opened the door a fraction, Guardian at his side. "Hello," Adam called, voice taut with wariness. The man raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "Sorry to bother you. Are you Adam Cooper?" Adam's heart pounded. "Yes. Who wants to know?" The man offered a small smile, though it looked somewhat forced. "My name is James Carlisle. I'm a private investigator. I was hired by someone looking for a dog. I believe you have him." Guardian growled, the sound low and menacing. Lena stepped up behind Adam, feeling a chill snake down her spine. "What do you mean, someone looking for a dog?" Carlisle sighed, glancing around as though wary of being watched. "May I come in? Or we can talk out here if you prefer. I don't mean any harm, truly." Adam hesitated, debating whether to trust this stranger's words. But Guardian's body language made it clear he was taking no chances. "What is this about?" Adam repeated more firmly. Carlisle exhaled. "Look, I get this is awkward. My client claims a dog of hers was stolen. She provided a photo. It looks a lot like the dog behind your door. She wants him back." Lena felt anger erupt inside her. "That's ridiculous. We found Guardian abandoned on a rural road, and he led us to a dying puppy locked in a rusted cage. That's not exactly the sign of a beloved pet." Carlisle nodded slowly as if expecting this reaction. "I'm not here to judge. I was just hired to locate the dog. My client's name is—" She said the dog was taken from her property. She said it was a champion breed, something about a high-value dog used for show or breeding. Adam let out a bitter laugh. "A champion breed, Guardian's half-starved, covered in scars and terrified of sudden movements. Does that sound like a pampered show dog to you?" Guardian, perhaps sensing the tension, let out another low growl, muzzle wrinkling. Carlisle took a cautious step back, hands still raised. "Look, I'm just trying to do my job. I've tracked your car registration and the motel you were staying at. After that break-in, you left in a hurry. Then I traced your license to an address linked to an uncle of yours, which is how I ended up here. I'm not necessarily convinced by my client's story, but she's paying me to find this dog." Lena's voice shook with fury. "So what does she want with him? If she was the one who locked the puppy in a cage or allowed someone else to do it, then—" Carlisle held up a hand. "I don't know anything about a puppy. She only mentioned the older dog, and she definitely didn't mention any ditch or cage. Could be she's lying, or maybe she sold the puppy and had second thoughts. I'm just telling you what I've been told." Adam's hands clenched into fists. The memory of Guardian's terror and Lucky's near-death ignited a protective rage. "We're not giving him up." Carlisle studied Adam's face. Something in his expression softened. "Look, I see how you two are with that dog, and from what I've gathered, you saved his life. If you can prove your story, that you rescued him, my client may not have a legal claim. But if she can produce any registration papers or chip data, it becomes complicated." Lena swallowed hard. "He doesn't have a microchip. The vet scanned him." Carlisle shrugged. "Then it may be your word against hers. But this woman has money. She's the kind that won't let go easily if she thinks that dog is valuable." He hesitated. "Off the record, if she was neglecting or abusing him, maybe you can fight for custody. But that means going to court, dealing with lawyers, maybe even a legal battle." Guardian let out another bark, as if urging Carlisle to leave. Carlisle nodded, stepping back. "I've delivered my message. She'll expect me to return with the dog, or at least with information. Now that I've found him, I have to decide what to tell her." Adam's pulse raced. "So what are you going to tell her?" Carlisle looked at them, then at Guardian. "I can't promise anything, but I've been doing this a long time. Something tells me this dog is where he should be." He pulled out a card from his pocket and extended it carefully. "Here's my number. If she pushes this, you'll need legal representation. I can at least back up your story that the dog is not in the condition of a well-cared-for show animal. But be careful." Adam took the card, exhaling slowly. Lena's heart hammered as Carlisle climbed back into his SUV and reversed down the gravel driveway. Only when the taillights disappeared did Guardian relax, the fur along his spine flattening. Lena sank to her knees, hugging Guardian around the neck. He let out a shuddering breath, licking her cheek. Lucky peered from the doorway, eyes wide, as if sensing the adult's fear. Adam placed a hand on Guardian's back. "We're not letting her take you away," he murmured. "Not ever." What followed was a tense, uncertain period. Each day, Adam and Lena worried that whoever she was might show up with lawyers or worse, especially after she learned Guardian was found with a brutally abused puppy. The quiet of the rural setting felt both like a blessing and a curse, peaceful, but also isolated, with no nearby neighbors to call for help if intruders came. Guardian, for his part, seemed to sense their anxiety. At times he'd patrol the front porch, sniffing the air, as if standing sentry. Lucky continued to heal, brightening their days with his clumsy attempts at playing. He'd bark happily, wagging his tail whenever Guardian gave him attention. They found themselves laughing more than they had in weeks, even as a sense of dread lurked beneath each moment. Eventually, a letter arrived. It was addressed to Adam in careful, looping handwriting. Inside was a single piece of paper. "Mr. Cooper, I understand you have my dog. You have no right to keep him. Return him to me immediately or my lawyers will be in touch. Samuels." No mention of how the dog ended up in a ditch, or how a puppy nearly died. Just a cold demand. Adam ripped the letter in half, seething. That evening he called Carlisle. "Did you tell her?" Adam asked, voice tight. "I had to inform her I found the dog," Carlisle replied. "But I did let her know the dog was in poor physical shape, obviously abused and currently under veterinary care. She didn't want to hear it. She's insisting it's her property. I told her it wouldn't be easy to prove in court. She threatened to fire me, then hung up. So what do we do?" Adam asked, knuckles whitening around the phone. Carlisle's sigh crackled through the line. "This is out of my hands now. She's the type who uses money to bully people. You need a lawyer, someone who can help you file a cruelty complaint or assist you in any custody dispute. If you have photographs or vet records showing the dog's condition, gather them. Show that you rescued him, not stole him. That might be enough to scare her off." Adam thanked Carlisle and hung up, feeling a heaviness in his chest. He stared at Guardian, who was stretched out on the floor, Lucky curled against his side. Lena, noticing Adam's despair, walked over. "We'll fight for him," she said, voice shaking. "We have to." The next week passed in a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and mounting tension. They found a local lawyer willing to take the case pro after hearing the story, an older woman who loved dogs and despised animal cruelty. She advised them to photograph every scar, every wound, to document the rescue timeline, and to have the veterinarian provide official statements. Meanwhile, Guardian seemed more at ease. Perhaps he sensed that Adam and Lena had his back. Lucky, free from bandages now, playfully gnawed on Guardian's ears, pouncing around the house in bursts of energy that left them all laughing. Hope blossomed in the midst of uncertainty. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch, the lawyer called. "Good news," she said. "I spoke with an attorney who occasionally works with Miss Samuels. It seems the moment we mentioned the puppy's dire condition, and the possibility of pressing charges for cruelty if Samuels tries to claim ownership of the older dog, she backed down. They're dropping their pursuit." Lena clutched Adam's arm, tears brimming. "So we're safe." "You're safe," confirmed the lawyer. "It sounds like Ms. Samuels realized it wasn't worth the trouble or the negative publicity to fight for a dog she clearly neglected. "I doubt you'll hear from her again." The news brought an almost physical release of tension. Lena jumped up and down, hugging Adam, who let out a loud whoop. Guardian perked his ears at the excitement, wagging his tail. Lucky, bounding in from inside, did a happy little dance around Guardian's feet. Adam bent to scoop Lucky into his arms. "Hear that, buddy? You're ours, both of you." Guardian nuzzled Adam's hand, as if to confirm the bond they'd forged. Lena's laughter drifted across the porch, pure and unburdened for the first time since this ordeal began. That night they celebrated with a homemade meal, grilled chicken, fresh vegetables from a nearby farmer's market, and a special dog-friendly treat for Guardian and Lucky. As the sun set in vibrant streaks of pink and gold, they sat in the backyard with the two dogs, feeling the soothing coolness of twilight envelop them. It was in that moment, Guardian lying on the grass, Lucky snuggled into his side, Lena leaning against Adam, that the enormity of what they all survived hit them. The near accident on the empty road, the terrifying discovery in the ditch, the frantic race to the vet, the ominous threats at the motel, and finally the legal scare. Through it all, Guardian's love for Lucky had never wavered, and Adam and Lena's resolve had grown stronger, tested by adversity. They watched Guardian gently lick Lucky's snout, as if telling the puppy everything was all right now. Lena felt a swell of pride, admiration, and gratitude. In the end, the stray who had chased their car, so desperate, so determined, had done more than just rescue a puppy. He had brought them all together, unveiling their capacity for compassion and courage in the face of cruelty. Adam slipped an arm around Lena's waist. "So, what next?" he asked softly. She smiled, eyes shining with tears she no longer needed to hide. "We move forward. We found a new place. We give these guys the life they deserve." Adam bent to kiss the top of Guardian's head. The dog's tail thumped softly against the grass. "Thank you," Adam whispered, voice catching in his throat. It was a thank you for guiding them to the puppy, for never giving up, for reminding them that love and loyalty can emerge from the most broken circumstances. Guardian gazed up at him with calm, trusting eyes. No words were needed. The moment glowed with the unspoken bond between human and dog, a testament to the power of compassion and the resilience of the spirit. Lucky stretched, yawning wide, then flopped against Guardian's fur, drifting into a peaceful sleep under the star-filled sky. And so, in the hush of that summer night beneath an endless canopy of stars, they found something precious and enduring: hope, healing, and a family woven together by an unforgettable act of devotion on a deserted road. It was a story of survival, of quiet miracles discovered in the most unexpected places. But above all, it was the story of two dogs, one who refused to abandon another in its darkest hour, and the kind-hearted couple who refused to turn away once they realized what was at stake. They sat there, Adam and Lena, Guardian and Lucky, listening to the symphony of crickets and watching fireflies dance in the warm night air. In that fragile, perfect moment, the world felt impossibly vast and profoundly kind. And though they would inevitably face more challenges ahead, they knew they could face them together, united by a bond stronger than fear, deeper than wounds, and braver than any darkness life could cast. The stray dog who had followed their car that night had done more than just plead for help. He had forged a connection that neither time nor adversity could break. And when they finally stopped the car, and Guardian showed them what he needed them to see, he had brought each of them to a place of empathy and love they might never have reached otherwise. Sometimes the simplest moments hold the greatest miracles: a half-starved stray, a desperate chase, and a resolute decision to keep driving until they discover why. In that choice, Adam and Lena found a piece of themselves, kindled by a nameless dog's plea for rescue. Ultimately, the dog's loyalty changed not just one life, but four. And that is how, on a forgotten stretch of road under a moonlit sky, heartbreak transformed into hope, forging a family where once there was only fear, and bringing a shining spark of possibility into a world that, in the quietest corners, still knows how to open its heart.